Hi, ladies and gentlemen. If you're watching this, it means I'm probably no longer with you. But I'll be back in a couple weeks. So you guys are going to move on to the next unit without me, and that is over chassis design. So just going over chassis real quick. A chassis is just the base framework for any wheeled vehicle. So your car has a chassis, a tractor has a chassis, bicycle has a chassis. Any wheeled vehicle is going to have some kind of basic structure on which the vehicle moves and everything else is built on top of. So for a car, our chassis would look something like this, whereas for our Vex robotics, our chassis is going to look something like this, where we've got our motors, we've got our gears, and we have our wheels that are then going to drive. And so whatever launching device you're going to be using or lifting device you're going to be using would be built on top of this chassis. It's probably the most important part of the robot, because if your robot can't move, if it can't navigate, if it can't defend itself, can't move quickly, any of those things, you're not going to be able to score any points. Doesn't matter how good your shooting arm is, if you don't have a chassis that can drive and that you can drive, you're out of luck. So which chassis is the best? It all depends on the game, and so looking at this year's game, we can check out the field layout, and this is going to kind of give us some ideas about what do we need to keep in mind when we are building our chassis and designing our chassis. So a couple of things, we're going to be shooting into goals that are in the corners, and so being able to, having an agile robot that we can turn easily to aim. So let's say you're sitting right here and you're trying to shoot and you wind up shooting over this direction. You need a robot that can turn easily to where you can shoot and hit that goal. And so being able to move quickly to get from one side of the field to the other, to pick up balls, then to shoot it in the goal and then come back. All of those things you need to keep in mind as you're designing your chassis. A couple things about chassis. There is a size restriction, so it can't be any bigger than 18 by 18, and that would be just our length times our width. And then also it can't be any taller than 18 inches, but your chassis should never be taller than 18 inches. And so just keep that in mind as you're building your chassis, that you're not going over that restriction. Smaller robots tend to be more agile, but bigger robots have better defense. If you build a small robot, it's going to be harder to fit your launching mechanisms in there, and it's going to be easier for other robots to push you out of the way, which is fair game. For that reason, I always recommend building your chassis as close to 18 by 18 as you can. Not too close, though, because you don't want to go over, but if you can get right on that 18 by 18, you got a really good chassis. And it also needs to be sturdy and stable. All wheels have to be perfectly perpendicular to the ground. If you don't attach things correctly, what's going to happen is the weight of your robot will push down, and that causes your wheels to bend, which will mess everything up. It'll ruin the motors, and it'll also make it so your robot doesn't travel well. So in these two examples that I've shown here, you can see how they're supported. So see how those wheels are attached on both sides by these C channels. That's going to keep those wheels perpendicular to the ground. Same thing right here. So if our motor was mounted on this side of the C channel, and then it would go through, our axle will go through both of those spots right there, that's going to also keep those level. And the last thing you need to be concerned with is four-wheel drive versus two-wheel drive. Which one do you want to use for your robot? All right, here's the four basic wheel types that you need to choose from when you are designing your chassis. There is, first off, the tank tread. So this right here, we've got tank treads. They're pretty self-explanatory. It's like they have on tanks. And then Omni wheels. These are Omni wheels, which look just like regular wheels, so they do roll just like that, but then they also have these little rollers that roll side to side. What this allows your robot to do is not only move forward like this, but it can slide back and forth pretty easily. It makes turning a little bit simpler if you have those on your robot, especially if you have them on the front of your robot, if you do a tank type steering. And then Mecanum wheels. These are pretty cool, and to be honest, I think these are going to be the hot ticket in this year's game. These wheels let you move in any direction that you want to. You can move forwards, you can move backwards, you can even move left and right while still facing the same direction. And you can move your robot in a complete circle if you want to, all while still facing forward or facing one particular direction. And then lastly, just regular wheels. These are just the plain Jane wheels. Typically, you don't see these much in a game. You might use them as rear wheels or as launchers or anything like that. And then there's also different types of bases. So you've got your wheels, but you need to figure out how you're going to orientate those wheels and how you're going to design your chassis. The three basic types are a square base, U-shaped base, and H-shaped base. So a square base just means you have Vex parts going all the way across, so the center area is not open to game scoring objects. So anything that you run into, you're just going to bump out of the way. The U-shaped base has only three sides of it closed, so this area right here is open. So in this year's game, if you were to drive up to some of the scoring balls, they would fit inside of this area. So it's a good way to channel objects with your robot. And the last one is the H-shaped base, very similar to the U-shape, except you have a bar through the middle. So that means you can collect objects here or you can collect objects here. A U-shaped or an H-shape also leaves room for you to reach down and pick things up. So if you think of this year with a launching mechanism, if you're doing something like a catapult, a U-shaped base would probably be a good choice because you can stretch that all the way back to the ground in the back, as opposed to with a square base where you would be blocked on either end. So building chassis is really important, and there's ones that students tend to gravitate towards just because they think they look the coolest or they think they're going to work the best. And so you spend a lot of time building a chassis for your competition robot, only to find out it doesn't work. So with this unit, this is something that we came up with last year. Instead of just saying, hey, go build yourself whatever chassis you want, I'm going to assign each group, or each group is going to be assigned a particular chassis to build. That way, as a class, you will have examples of several different chassis that you can look at, you can drive, and you can decide which one is going to work for you. Once again, we're up against a time crunch, so we've got to move quickly through this. So once we get our chassis assigned, hopping on those really, really quickly and start building them so that you have time to test them, build them, and then redesign if necessary. But the overall objectives for this unit is to build an example chassis to share with the class. You're also going to get practice building a sturdy chassis, so the chassis that you build for this project probably won't be the chassis that you use for the competition, but you're going to get some experience putting them together so that your next one comes together a little bit easier. You're also going to learn how to program the VexNet controller, so rather than doing a standalone unit where we learn how to program with the controllers, we're just going to learn how to program the controllers in order to drive around our chassis. And you also get practice driving a robot, which is invaluable. You'd be surprised how many people show up to the competition and have never driven their robot before. It's a good opportunity to get your hands used to the controllers, get used to how the robots move. So in this unit, we said you're already going to be assigned a wheel and base type to build your chassis from, so different combinations will be out there. Your goal is going to then be to research designs online. So look at YouTube, look at Google, look at the Vex forums. All of those are going to have pictures and descriptions of all the different types. So there's a lot of variety out there to choose from. You're not doing this completely dry with no experience. Go on there, find an example you like, and copy that example. You need to program your chassis and then test it on the field. And at the end, your grade is going to be based upon a presentation that you will make to the class. In that presentation, you'll show off your chassis and you'll talk about the pros and cons of that particular chassis so that everyone's informed on the different types and their benefits and downsides. While you guys are doing this, I also need you to start researching gearing and gear ratios. So being able to put proper gears and gearing is going to be important for your chassis, and then also once we get to launching mechanisms, being able to mess with the gears as well. So while you're doing your research about your chassis, look up gearing and gear ratios for Vex in particular. Okay, something new that is coming in this unit, it's going to stick around for the rest of the semester and probably the rest of the year, is our personal management grade. So you're going to be given a sheet at the beginning of the week that has 3 different boxes on it. It looks like this. So this is just showing the Monday one. There's also going to be one for Wednesday and for Friday. Don't cut them out, leave them on a sheet. But this is going to be basically just showing whether or not you're on task each day. This class isn't like other classes where you have worksheets that you do and then you turn those worksheets in and you get a grade for them. Instead, you just have basically that final project. So last unit it was the test on the virtual world. This unit's going to be that presentation. But you need some way to show that you are making progress towards that goal, towards that final product final test. Think of this class more like a job where you are in charge of building one particular thing. Your personal management is basically just me paying you for doing your work every day. Okay, I'm paying you with a grade instead, though. So what I need to see then is daily work being done by the group and by everyone in the group. So you're showing that you're able to work as a team, you're showing that you're able to plan things out, and you're showing that you're on task. Really think about it. If you spend the entire day and you're sitting around and you're just texting or playing a video game, why would I pay you? If you show to work and do that, no one's going to pay you for that, so I shouldn't have to pay you with a grade. So on days like that, I just give you a 0 for personal management. And so this paper will be assigned to a team, not an individual. And so as a team, if you've got someone on your team who isn't pulling their weight, they're just sitting around texting, and then as a result, the whole group is going to get a lower score. So you need to make sure that everyone has something they're doing and that you regulate making sure that everyone's working on stuff. If I or the substitute looks up and sees that someone in your group or a couple people in the group are just kind of relaxing while one person's working or no one's working, it's going to hurt your personal management score. Also, at every lab bench, I would like you to get a piece of, there's some large Post-it paper in the room somewhere. Grab one of those sheets and hang it back at your lab bench, and that'll be yours to write your objectives on every day. So the objectives are just going to be what you as a team are working on that day. On your objectives, you should post what it is that you're going to be doing that day, and also what each group member is going to be working on. And those need to be posted within the first 15 minutes of class. That way myself or the substitute can look up, see what you guys are supposed to be working on, see what each individual member is supposed to be working on, and then check in with you to see how that's going. Not coming up with that plan and posting it within the first 15 minutes of class is going to once again bring down that personal management score. So on that objective sheet, go ahead and write the date for that particular day. And kind of the thought is you don't need to write down this exact wording, but you're just going to be posting, if today was successful, we will have completed what by the end of the class period. And then on that sheet, also make sure you assign tasks to all members. Remember that anyone not helping hurts everyone's personal management. So if you say, well, I'm going to be building the chassis, the other two are just going to be sitting around. Well, then you're going to get a smaller personal management because you need to find things for everyone in the team to be working on. So here's an example of a posting from 927. So today we're going to build the left and right side of the chassis, and then a list of what everyone's working on. So Lee's going to build the left side, Bunson's going to build the right side, Sloan is going to gather materials and help the other two out. Those are objectives for the day. If we are successful by the end of the class period, what we're saying is we should have the left and right sides of the chassis done. And also key here is the idea of the end of the period. You are not writing unit objectives, so you should not write the objective, build a chassis. That is your goal for the entire unit, but that is not your goal for that particular day. Your goal for a day needs to be shorter, needs to be more detailed than just building a chassis or the general goal. And so things like building left side or right side, attaching the wheels, working on the programming. So specific goals that we can measure as your supervisors. Alright, here is your goals for today. You're going to form groups of 2 or 3, no more, no less than that. And then there is a cup that has the wheels and base types. You're going to draw one piece of paper from each, and so each group will get a particular wheel type and a particular base type. And you will need to design and build a chassis around those 2 wheels and base types. When you're doing this, this goes for the substitute or myself, make sure that there are no repeats and at least one of each wheel type and one of each wheelbase. After you do that, today should be spent researching online to find examples of each wheelbase and wheel and base type, and then come up with a building plan. So in your notebook, start making sketches of potential designs so you have those later. I'd recommend bookmarking pages that you come across just so you can go back to them and reference them later, but then draw some detailed sketches as well, because you're going to have to follow whatever you find online till the end of this unit. If you have time, maybe not, start gathering materials and building, time permitting that is. Just keep in mind, chassis should be completed by the 7th of October. Seems like a lot of time, but it's probably not. Remember those first robots that we built, how long it took to build those simple robots? This is a chassis, so it's going to be even a little bit tougher, but at this point we've got some experience, but you need to be on task, and that's the point of coming up with the objectives and signing tasks so that you can make sure that this does get done by the 7th. There's no extensions because we are at a deadline. Alright, that's it. Good luck. If you have any questions that can't be answered by my TAs or the sub, on Google Classroom you can post messages on the wall there, and those pop up to my phone, and when I get a chance I'll try and answer them as quickly as I can. And while chassis need to be done by the 7th, your presentations will occur on the 12th. So the 7th is a Wednesday, but we don't have school on Friday, and the following Monday is when your presentations will happen. And so those chassis should be done towards the beginning of the 7th, that way you have some time to work on your presentations before Monday.